It's a soup eat soup world for the characters of The Boys on Amazon Prime, but not all superpowers are created equal. You can't have a satire of superhero comics without superheroes, and you can't have superheroes without superpowers.
That's a hell of a party trick.
Some will debate their favorite character in whatever comic book, reality, or even who could beat who. YouTube channels even get into that game. But the ultimate debate is, what is the best superpower? Well, for the TV series The Boys, we have a rundown. Just the TV series. For the comics, we'd be here all day. Alright, let's start a debate. It's the classic question everyone had to answer at one time or another, that boils superpowers down to two choices, invisibility or flight, mostly to call the invisible crowd weirdos. But there are better uses to being invisible than going into changing rooms, and maybe you don't want to spend your life as that person who can fly. But that's for another video that will never happen. The Seven's invisible member, Translucent, is captured despite his invisibility. It doesn't help if it's on. It's worth noting, however, Translucent isn't even in the top 3 creepiest members of the Seven. There's one superpower where it's debatable if it's even a power rather than a highly developed skill. But then, everyone trained at the level of Michael Phelps or Usain Bolt, but they were so much faster regardless. Could that be a superpower? There's only one of them. Now, if the weapon you're good at peaked during the 1500s, and you're still holding your own, maybe it really is a superpower. But not enough of a superpower that it protects Hawkeye from being the most joked about Avenger. For The Boys, Eagle the Archer and Gunpowder's powers are essentially accuracy. It's less that accuracy isn't useful as much as it's something that can be obtained through significant practice, which is part of what makes it so alluring, that maybe we could have that power. This entry's low spot on the list can be chalked up to personal bias. Well, honestly, the entire list is that, but this one especially. Stretchy Powers. Even the Fantastic Four tacitly admit that it's Richard's big old brain that makes him what he is, not his ability to stretch. I mean, look, is it actually useful? Sure. You can stretch yourself flat and sneak indoors. You can bind people with your stretchy arms. You can stretch your head up over walls or other obstacles. You can become a trampoline or absorb blows. But when you get right down to it, it's just a silly power that almost always looks silly. There is one version of Stretchy Powers that can be useful, if only for how really disturbing it is. Love Sausage can make a certain part of his anatomy grow, in the way young men imagine when they know it's supposed to be big but don't know how big is big, or what you're supposed to do with it when it's big. So Smashing Bully seems as good a use as any. And unless your foe is really into hentai, just using the power is going to be enough to put most off their cornflakes. Deliberately vague enough? We can move on? Let's. As much grief as Hawkeye gets as the Avengers Archer, he has nothing on the pylon that happens to Aquaman. 71% of Earth might be water, with 96% of that being oceans, but also, we haven't seen all of it, or most of it. 80% of the ocean is unmapped and unexplored. We've put people on the moon and enough robot dune buggies on Mars to have a race, but the ocean? I don't know, it gets creepy after a few hundred feet. Also, most of the supervillainy takes place on dry land. Stories have to be kinda contrived in order for breathing in water and talking to sea life mattering. Otherwise, you're just a weirdo who talks to fish, which is honestly the least weird thing the Deep does. This is gonna be another one of the more debatable listings in light of the Ant-Man Thanos theory, especially since Termite on The Boys sort of proved the thesis, but not on a Thanos level threat. But when it gets right down to it, being crazy tiny is not all that great. A lot of Ant-Man's powers have to be met with a healthy dose of don't worry about it. With a soup like Termite from The Boys, you're just itty-bitty. You can mess around with some stuff once you get there. Covering ground super tiny takes a while. Even getting around your foe to affect them in any way takes a minute, and that's if you don't fall off or get flicked or squished or whatever. There's a popular notion that being blind turns your other senses into superpowers. Maybe it's just paying way more attention to them to make up for the missing one, or your brain is just rewriting itself to use the other senses to gather information it would normally get from eyes. Regardless, characters like Daredevil for Marvel or Blind Spot for The Boys get superpower senses in exchange for sight. Daredevil also gets echolocation that allows him to react to things quickly. Blind Spot, not as lucky, as Homelander highlighted Blind Spot's blind spot. That's all you have to do is clap his ears and he's out. Ah, Supersonic. You were on your way from heel to hero, from background character to a member of the Resistance. That is, as long as you are way more careful about who you tell about the Resistance than Supersonic was. Supersonic's power is essentially a superclap that creates a sonic shockwave, like Gael from Street Fighter. But as useful as that can be against schmoes, most of the time the person playing Gael won with those stupid kicks. It's a good power for clearing the room, but even the Hulk doesn't use it that often, as it's too imprecise even for him. If any one superpower has led to some unfortunate consequences, it would have to be Doppelganger's shape-shifting powers. While Mystique gets to disrupt the world of the mutants in both eras of Fox's mutant franchise, a lot of that is down to her leggy, kicky, chokey powers. Once being able to disguise herself as anyone has got her to where she needs to be. Doppelganger does not appear to have leggy, kicky, chokey powers. Instead, he's getting by being a surrogate for emotionally unstable soups. Specifically Homelander, where his power becomes disturbing enough that he'd rather just not have powers at all. At some point in everyone's lives, you have to utter the phrase, "I can't read minds." But oh man, if you could? According to portrayals of that power, everyone is constantly thinking the darkest thoughts possible. No one ever looks into someone's mind and finds them trying to figure out which set of organs a centaur uses, the horse ones or the human torso ones. When it comes down to it, with mind reading, you have to rely on the try not to think about an elephant problem to get your target to think about the thing you want to know. The boy's Mesmer has an extra step of difficulty. He has to be touching the person who at that point is thinking, why is this dude touching me? Welcome to the most generic power on the list, Enhanced Strength. It's a sliding scale, of course. Spider-Man can lift up to 10 tons, but Superman or the Hulk can lift anything the story requires. And our print side has already come up with 10 characters stronger than that. But unless it's off the charts super strength, most of the time it's just the bare minimum to join the fight. If you're a Marvel fan from the mid-80s to present, you have, at some point, maybe with friends, maybe all alone, balled your fists and tensed your forearms and said, snicked. Retractable claws are just so cool. Just ask your cat. Don't ask your cat, they won't understand the question, and even if they did, they'd probably just give you a snide answer. That's the kind of aloofness you have with the retractable claws. But unlike Wolverine, the boys' Pop Claw doesn't have her claws reinforced with a made-up super metal. Turns out that's key. It's still cool though. Snicked. That's fun to say. A lot of superheroes have one form or another of enhanced durability, even if it's just plot armor. But even then, when people are throwing around other superpowers and using a police car as a pair of boxing gloves, you're still gonna get hurt. And not all of those injuries are going to be ones you can just walk off. That is unless you're the female of the species or gecko and you have rapid healing powers. Depending on how intense it is, regeneration will keep you in the fight no matter what hits you. Of course, you have to be able to do something between getting hit or it'll be a long day. Most superpowers just come out of the minds of comic book creators as something that would be cool to draw. Very few of these powers are things that people think might exist in the real world. One of those powers is telekinesis, the ability to move things with your mind. It's a handy power, the Jedi and Sith alike use it frequently. Kimiko's brother Kenji had that power, but it turns out it needs a companion power, or while you're flinging any loose object at your foe, they might be able to get their more lethal power in play. Walking can be a drag. Wouldn't it be easier to just pop, appear where you wanted to go? Huey's power when he injects the temporary compound V. It's a handy power as long as you have a positive body image, since it doesn't teleport clothes. It might be a good time saver, but you also need the reflexes and agility to make the most of being able to teleport, which puts the power right in the middle. There's one thing that emo vampire kids, super rich people, and fans of people having sword fights in non-sword fight settings have in common. They all want to live forever. I mean, sure, all love must die, but that just makes you cool and broody, or annoyingly nihilistic, I guess. Anyway, it takes time to get really good at something, and then just as your skills are honed, your body starts wanting to slowly pack it in. What you really need is some good old-fashioned longevity, like Stormfront or Soldier Boy. For the series, Butcher has only recently started leveling the playing field with temporary doses of Compound V, but despite his shortcomings on the power scale, he's been successful enough curbing soups that they made him official. What superpower made up the gap? A complete and total lack of scruples. Sure, it makes basically everyone hate him, but it puts W's on the board for him and Homelander, Black Noir, and Stan Edgar. There's just something alluring about fire. You know it can hurt you. You know it's destroying stuff, but once we figured out how to make it, Winters got a lot easier, and you finally had something that would scare that giant cat-like thing that kept coming around. Pyrokinesis, that is the ability to control fire like former member of the Seven Lamplighter, is another one of those room-sweeping powers. But it also comes with a raft of unintended consequences. Just ask the magic user in your D&D group, who thinks Fireball is the answer to all questions. It's the other side of the superpower question, the one that's supposedly the right answer, and admittedly it's pretty cool. The power to up and away at high speed or hover menacingly over a crowd is handy for both getting around and for intimidating crowds. It's also handy if you want to nope yourself out of consequences for your actions, as Homelander often uses his for. One of the earliest meme gifs was of a news reporter whose head suddenly explodes. That's from a movie called Scanners. I don't know what it's about. I assume someone at a press conference who gets asked one too many silly questions and their heads explode. Surely everyone in their darkest moments has checked to see if you can blow up people's heads with your mind. Mostly because you know you can't. Because if you could, you'd be horrified. Unless you were Nadia, who just keeps her ability to pull a Scanners on someone on the down low. If there's any spell that looms as large as Fireball, it's Lightning Bolt. Despite issues regarding short-circuiting, shooting lightning out of your fingers is just kinda cool. It's how you can make someone pay for their lack of vision, or short out Spider-Man's web shooters. Try to revive a genocidal ideology that it took half the world to defeat like Stormfront. Okay, so it's not the best people that get the electrical shooting powers, but it still looks cool. Regenerative healing is pretty handy, but it's nowhere near as handy as just being invulnerable. To even hurt Superman, you need to be magic or have a groovy little rock. For Homelander, there is no kryptonite, and his only weakness is his pathological desire to be loved. Or feared, it turns out. Since restraint isn't his strong suit, both of his love interests, Queen Maeve and Stormfront, have also been invulnerable just to survive the affair. What better way to clear a room than when your little lady Katie goes kaboom? The big problem with exploding is whatever exploded only gets to do it once. But not if it's a superpower like a teenage daughter from Animaniacs, or a super terrorist secretly created by Vought to justify Compound V in the military. Nikid gets the power to go boom, and then go home, but just him. Just know that every time you fist bump a member of Generation X, they are resisting the urge to say Wonder Twin powers activate, and then tell you what kind of animal they want to become, or water. Zan and Jaina were aliens on the Super Friends cartoon who, when they clicked their rings together, could become an animal, or something water temporarily is. Their powers weren't great. Zan really got the short end of the twin stick on that one. The TNT twins are the boys' version of the Wonder Twins, with an upgrade. When they hold hands, they can shoot beams out of their other hands. The drawback, of course, is that they have to hold hands. But aside from that inconvenience, in the world of the boys, lasers are where it's at. Homelander has basically all of Superman's powers, and most of his swagger and none of his boundless empathy. That's Garth Ennis's whole argument with the series, that when you're that much more powerful than everyone else, empathy is practically impossible. Since he doesn't have empathy nor scruples as discussed earlier, Homelander makes the most out of his laser eyes / heat vision. That's because outside of a small number of the 7, it's a game over move. Homelander wouldn't waste time flying around in the Lion. He'd go straight to Voltron and form the Blazing Sword. No need to hold your greatest weapon in reserve if laser eyes can get you home before lunch. One of the most powerful and sometimes feared beings in the Marvel Universe is a mild-mannered posh professor who gets around in a fancy wheelchair. Why in a world of rage monsters and multiple pantheons of gods is he so revered? Well, he's a leading thinker on powers and society. But also, if he felt like it, he could just wander into your mind and start rearranging stuff until you think you're an Afghan puppy named Randall. Combine that with a big old brain and lots of training, Professor X is deemed one of the most dangerous people in the Marvel Universe. And he's not even the best psychic-powered person in that jurisdiction. The ability to enter your opponent's mind, like Mindstorm or Silver Kincaid, can not only end the fight before it's begun, it can make people believe they're fighting on the side of the angels, with way less propaganda. Just like Stretchy Powers was a personal bias, Super Speed is one as well, as I contend that it's really the most OP power. When you can move and perceive time so fast that it appears everyone is standing still and bullets only crawl to their target, essentially how can you lose unless you too are super fast? So there always has to be contrivance to put the speedster on the bench. In the case of A-Train, it's that he's slowly losing his powers. Unfortunately, he's up against a guy who can also move bonkers fast as well as other abilities. It's easy with her wholesome look and sparkly costume to think that Starlight is just Dazzler with a sense of purpose, but even Dazzler gets underestimated. Starlight's power is the ability to gather the energy around her and emit it as a powerful burst of light. What comic book readers might know, or people who follow the showrunners, but the character doesn't know, there's no real upper limit to that power. Most of the time she's holding back because she'll take out Huey, and who knows who else, as it's been suggested that she could take out a city with a burst of her power. It turns out the MacGuffin the boys were searching for was a long-lost hero that went all Winter Soldier, and was captured and tortured so the Russians could figure out what made Soldier Boy tick. Perhaps one of the most accurate satires of at least Marvel, where there's a whole cottage industry of superheroes that are a result of someone trying to recreate Erskine's Super Soldier Zero. But Soldier Boy has a brand new bag, and it seems like it's combined the kablooey of blowing up or shooting energy with the removal of powers afterward. For these reasons, Butcher and Huey think this is the weapon that can bring down Homelander. There's going to be a Season 4, so I'm going to put money on it doesn't work, but theoretically, it can. There's one power that overwhelms all the kicky, punchy, stretchy, splody, beam-shooting powers combined, and it exists right here in this world, and that's corporate power. Even Homelander's power move to take over Vought has the company dragging him down like a subterranean vine monster. Edgar managed to use the corporate power of Vought to exploit political contacts, manipulate the flow of information, and essentially shield Vought and all its proprietary soups from the consequences of their horrible, horrible actions. Even a boosted up Butcher doesn't dream he's powerful enough to topple that. There is one hero we met whose powers weren't clearly defined, but given his name, it's clear that power is to put the Cat Stevens song Moonshadow in your head until you slowly go mad and actually feel like you're being stalked by a moonshadow.